Good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you are and at what time you are viewing this. Welcome to another episode, the last episode of the spring semester for NASPA Region 3's HBCUs Educate with Dr. K. And today we are talking about intersections of student affairs and advancement. And so as always, we'll give about 2 or 3 minutes for attendees to come in the room. And then we're going to get started with the discussion. And then we'll leave room at the end, anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes to open up for any questions that you may have for our panelists. This is being recorded and you will be able to view this again on our YouTube channel, as well as other episodes that we have recorded prior to this one. So we'll just start in about 1 or 2 minutes, giving people enough time to come on in the room. All right, so let's get right into it. So once again, welcome to another episode and the final episode of this semester's HBCUs Educate with Dr. K, sponsored by NASPA Region 3. And today we're talking about the intersection between student affairs and your advancement and development offices on campus. And so this is going to be a great discussion. I'm looking forward to the wisdom that will be shared with you all from our panelists. As always, we want to give honor to all of our HBCUs, especially honor the foundation and legacy since 1837, in which Cheyney University was founded, being the first and oldest HBCU. So let me introduce you to our panelists. So first up, we have Dr. Reshunda Mahone, who is a HBCU Advanced Advocate and the Assistant Dean for Advancement and Alumni Engagement with the Goizueta, and I hope I pronounced that right, Business School at Emory University. And with over 21 years of advancement and development experience, she has supported every aspect of higher education fundraising. Dr. Mahone has previously held fundraising roles at Virginia State University, Spelman College, and the University of Miami, Georgia State University, and the University of Central Florida. She began her career in advancement at her alma mater, the University of Florida. She has experience in campaign fundraising, data analytics, leadership development, operational optimization, boss lady, okay? She is an active member of the Council for the Advancement and Support of Education and was appointed to the Commission of Philanthropy, the Minority Serving Institution Advisory Board, and the District 3 boards. Dr. Mahone also serves on the African American Development Officers Network Board and previously served on the Association of Fundraising Professionals boards for the Central Virginia, Greater Atlanta, and the Miami chapters. Dr. Mahone earned and holds an EDD from Virginia Commonwealth University, an MBA from the University of Central Florida, and a BS in Decision and Information Sciences from the University of Florida, and is a certified fundraising executive. Welcome, welcome to the show, Dr. Mahone.
Thank you.
Yes, boss lady. Okay. Now, we have with us Dr. DeShanna Brown. Dr. DeShanna Brown graduated from Kennesaw State University and received her EDD in higher education leadership from Nova Southeastern University. She started her higher education career in the Office of Undergraduate Studies, Dual Enrollment Honors Program at the Kennesaw State in 2003 and began her career in development at Georgia State University in 2005. She continued to progress in her career, holding positions at private and public institutions, including Spelman College and Louisiana State University, eventually becoming Vice President for Institutional Advancement, Development, Marketing, and Communications at Edwards Waters College, which is out there in Jacksonville, Florida, for those of you who may not know, in 2018. During her vice presidency at Edward Waters, Dr. Brown continued to demonstrate how she is an authentic servant leader who has an understanding and appreciation of the nature of higher education and issues important to the academy. Dr. Brown's commitment to creating pathways for underrepresented students from economically disadvantaged backgrounds is apparent in all that she accomplished at Edward Waters vice president. Some of her achievements included raising nearly $15 million during her tenure and the securing of $7.4 million in state funding for the fiscal year 2021. And this funding was a 72% increase over the prior years. She was also integral in the establishment of the inaugural Honors College at Edwards Waters and secured a total investment of $250,000 from the Jessie Ball DuPont Fund. Additionally, she was instrumental in securing funds to support the college's food security initiatives, resulting in the establishment of the college's first ever food pantry. Prior to Edward Waters, Dr. Brown served as director of annual giving for Spelman College, one of the most selective women's college in the nation and a global leader in the education of women of African descent. During her tenure, she led the team in raising more than $8 million against a $150 million comprehensive campaign goal to support scholarships, academic initiatives, and campaigns for campus renewal during the college's largest ever fundraising effort, the Campaign for Spelman College. Welcome to the show, Dr. Brown. Listen, welcome.
Well, thank you.
We got some heavy hitters. So, for me, it's always good to talk with people that know money. Right? So definitely want to give honor to the both of you. One, for the work that you're doing at HBCUs as it relates to advancement and development, and then also just you being you as Black women in these spaces. And so definitely want to honor that. Now let's get into this conversation. So first up, can you tell us what exactly is development and advancement in higher education? What is that office?
Well, I guess I'll start. Advancement, development, it certainly has different names and definitions. It's really the philanthropic arm of every institution whose mission and goal is to raise money, typically through philanthropy and charitable giving, to support the institution. And it kind of bridges the gap that tuition alone does not necessarily cover. And for those who are state funded, where the state allocations for higher education institutions don't cover. We, in institutional advancement or in development advancement, we think about it, the who and the how when it comes to raising money. The who, most popular and most relevant to many institutions is our alumni, and thinking about connecting and engaging and encouraging them to give to the institutions. Other individuals include faculty, staff, parents, friends, which is, our term for those who may not be direct graduates from the institution, but certainly support and believe in the mission of the institution. We also think about corporations and foundations. And something else that is really key to our strategy is thinking about legacy giving and estate giving. So that's kind of the who, and the what or the how. We think about giving at different levels. Your broad-based crowdfunding types, method. We segment. Some of the institutions call that annual giving. When you start getting into some of your larger gifts, we think about major gifts or lead gifts. And then your significant or transformational gifts, we think about those as principal gifts. And so kind of dividing out just the level of giving. Our job is really to help support things that tuition and state funding alone cannot cover. We want to seek those outside supporters. Like I said, most popular is our alumni, to fill in that gap.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. I'll add to what Dr. Mahone stated. In addition to the portfolio of institutional advancement and development, at some institutions, it also includes marketing and communications, which is a critical component in solicitation efforts, having a concerted effort to market and communicate those relevant strategic fundraising priorities. Additionally, within institutional advancement and development are the two types of campaigns. We have capital campaigns as well as comprehensive campaigns that covers the entire gamut of the advancement and development portfolio.
So you mentioned alumni being, one of the main people that you're looking for. How do you, and then you mentioned, Dr. Brown, the marketing and communication aspect. What does marketing look like to alumni to encourage them to want to give back, especially when you have, not all alumni are eager to give back to their institutions. I'll be transparent, I'm one of those. I didn't attend the HBCU though, right? So because of my experiences. So how do you utilize that marketing and communication skill set within advancement development to reach out to those alumni?
Well, I'll definitely say, so part of our secret sauce, so Reshunda and I actually served together at Spelman prior to her propelling to her greatness as well. So Reshunda and I have been on this development path for some time. We also served together at Georgia State as well. So I will say, and Reshunda will probably add on to this, one of the things that we were most successful at was alumni participation at Spelman College. There were over 16,000 alumni in the portfolio at the time when we served, and under our leadership, we achieved the best alumni participation rate for historically Black colleges and universities in the country. We did that together as a collective, and Reshunda will probably speak a little bit more to this, but it started under her leadership prior to me onboarding there. A year or two after she was there, the Every Woman Every Year campaign, where we encouraged every alum to make a gift to the institution each and every year. Reshunda, you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, and so, along those lines with that campaign, the president at the time really had a vision to increase the participation of alums who give back to the institution. And the Every Woman Every Year campaign was really our answer to something we kind of found in the data, where alums were typically giving during their reunion year, which occurred once every 5 years. And so it was kind of a shifting of thought from a once every 5 years to, no, we need you to support the institution every single year, thus Every Woman Every Year. But Dr. K, I want to speak on something that you mentioned, and it's, the idea, especially for those, those institutions who support those institutions and professionals who are possibly joining us and watching this later on, that, a lot of the key for us, we can do the best marketing, we can do the best communications, but it's really something you hit on, which is the experience while you're there. And so I think for student affairs professionals, you guys do a phenomenal job of providing the engagement and the connectedness for students to the institutions. And sometimes as advancement professionals, we fail to continue that same level of engagement once they graduate. But I know there are some who are out there who think, my experience at my institution wasn't the greatest. How dare they reach out and ask for money? And so it is a very specific type of strategy that I think institutions really need to be aware of, that it's really, if you're thinking about really encouraging alums to give, it does start day one. And when I say day one, is day one when they apply. It's not day one when they come to campus. It's what is that experience when they think about your institution, they interact, they apply, they get their acceptance, they get their information about moving. It's all of that. And I think when we can make that experience the best it can be, And we also educate students on how they are here because of what alums and past donors have done. The experience may not be the best, but at least making them aware of it. The likelihood of them wanting to give back, I think, would definitely increase no matter what we send out through marketing and communications. I think that's something that we won't be able to solve if that experience wasn't the greatest.
Yeah, and what I heard in that is the whole idea on this concept of development advancement is for everyone on campus position to be a part of that.
Correct.
We don't, especially in student affairs, we don't hear that often, if any at all. So thank you for that.
Yes, and I know we'll get to this in some, hopefully later on in the conversation, but I think that sometimes differentiates some of the other institutions who've kind of figured that formula out, and they realize that, they are grooming their future donors in that experience. And so, yes, like I said, student affairs professionals, you guys have the recipe. You provide those extra experiences that students kind of are more attracted to, even faculty in that experience, when they interact with the financial aid office, all of those tie into how students will create that perception in their mind on what that looks like when they do graduate and they become, the great alums that the institution has really prepared them to be. You really want that connection to be there to encourage them to pay it forward.
Right.
Absolutely. And I would just add that another way in which student affairs professionals can be impactful along the journey of the student's experience is through incorporating philanthropy and leadership conversations as a part of the freshman seminar courses. For example, I did develop a freshman seminar course at Georgia State called Leadership and in the Nonprofit Sector. And in that course, it was an introduction to philanthropy, not only as far as giving back to the institution, but also philanthropy as a career, i.e. we're advancement professionals. And the Andrew Young School of Policy Studies, they have a particular degree program that leads to studies in the nonprofit sector. Similar to that, one of the other areas that student affairs professionals can definitely make an impact to encourage giving prior to graduation is incorporating senior gift programs, incorporating for example, at Spelman, we onboarded the graduate legacy program, the senior tassel, and so forth, where students were recognized at commencement for giving back prior to graduation. That's a model and a best practice just across the country. The best programs originate out of student affairs because you all have a number of affinity groups within student affairs, starting with student government and so forth. We have found in our experience that student government leaders are our first group of champions to help set that philanthropic footprint forward. So definitely those are some tools that you all can definitely implement in partnership with the Central Development Office if you don't already have a Chief Development Officer in your unit.
Right. I'm taking notes. So let's talk more particularly, and you've kind of led to it in your conversations about Spelman, but let's talk about development advancement at HBCUs. Now,
absolutely.
Dr. Mahone, you mentioned, private and public. And so let's start there in terms of what do these offices look like if they look different at a public HBCU versus a private HBCU?
I don't think there is much difference by way of the engagement of individuals, corporations, and foundations. I think sometimes there are some institutions, specifically those that are public, that may have a government relations or someone who advocates and promotes advocacy for the state legislature when it comes to capital allocations and different things like that. So that may be found in more public institutional advancement models or development advancements than you would see at the private institutions, because that, is done a little bit differently. Other than that, I think you would find the same type of work, the same type of functions, alumni engagement, some sort of operations. You would find a major gift or an annual giving component. Some of your larger institutions, whether public or private, may have a more decentralized model where there may be a fundraiser assigned to a student affairs division or to your different colleges and units. Some where it's all funnels through one office where they're, kind of a generalist fundraising for the entire school. So that may be just depending, again, it could be public or private. It's just the type of institutions and the way they're set up. Usually your more your universities with graduate and professional degrees, you'll see that kind of decentralized model. But for the most part, outside of the government relations or the government entity, that could be a difference between the public and the private.
Gotcha. Now, you mentioned some institutions, depending on size and et cetera, you may have a fundraiser that's dedicated to a certain department. With that, and I don't know if you can speak to this, but it's common practice that you get these funds, when the institution get these funds, who pretty much says it goes wherever it needs to go? Who does that?
Well, for the most part, it's the donor.
Okay.
The donor will determine, how they do have an opportunity to provide some sort of guideline or criteria or basis on how the institution should direct those gifts. And then after that, the donor releases all claims, if you will, to that gift. And so it's the institution then who takes the responsibility to carry out and do exactly what the donor specified. And so that's typically how we try to make sure when we're out soliciting for gifts that whatever the donor intended is something that the university or the institution can fulfill. I would joke with my fundraisers. I said, if you at one of the institutions, I said, we don't have a medical school, so please don't go out there asking for money for a medical program. We cannot fulfill that gift.
Right.
There's no medical school. So you will want to make sure that all of your fundraisers are well versed. And I think this is something, as Dr. Brown was mentioning, when you're talking about opportunities for donors to connect and support, that the fundraisers can clearly articulate the need for those gifts. So as they're out there talking to the donors would then be more inclined to then say, yes, I believe in that area or that priority. I want my gifts to support it. And so that's typically how we want the conversation kind of.
And I would add that having served as a chief development officer for student affairs at a large public land grant institution at LSU, formerly, I will definitely say one of the things that student affairs chief development officers can do, or student affairs staffers can do, is develop, I call it a student affairs 101, where you pick out those top 3 strategic funding priorities for your unit, and then you go and have a coffee and conversation with those academic unit development officers. Because part of the challenge in getting funding directly allocated to student affairs is that many of the unit development officers, they have no idea what are the strategic funding priorities within your unit. They know about student affairs because they hear about all the co-curricular experiences and so forth, but they have no idea what your strategic fundraising priorities are. So one of the forward-moving items that you can take away is to definitely develop a student affairs 101, like a roadshow. I called it the Student Affairs Roadshow, Student Affairs 101. And in those conversations and presentations to central development, we talked about the top 3 strategic funding priorities, which was around student retention, academic success, as well as emergency funding for students.
Wow. I thank you for saying that, because it, ignorance for me was, the donors or whomever gives the funds and we determine where they go. And then because we think like that, we're like, well, why is all the money going to that school? Why that program? Why we don't ever get any money? But now it makes sense, is that the donor, is the person that says, or the group that says, this is where I want my money to go, et cetera, which leads me to this whole understanding, for me working in assessment, is that if we're not telling our story in student affairs about what we're providing for students, what the students need, then we're not going to get those funds. If we're not having those intentional conversations with people in the Office of Development and Advancement about what are our strategic fundraising priorities. I don't think that we think through. As someone who works on strategic planning for student affairs, I'm gonna be honest, I don't think that I've thought about fundraising priorities.
Absolutely.
It's something that I assess.
I definitely would say that's a partnership with assessment, as well as the VP or Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs, to be able to talk through what are those strategic fundraising priorities. Now, I will caution you, student affairs professionals, they want everything.
Yes.
And a part of selling to the unit development officers and the deans at the institutions over the academic enterprise is ensuring that it aligns with the strategic plan and priorities of the academic enterprise. So it's not something that you do in silo, it's more of a partnership and a strategic partnership, so that when the college development officers go out to solicit and they review a menu of opportunities with donors, student affairs is always included, and it's in the footprint of the academic curriculum as well. It's not something done in isolation. So definitely aligning those strategic fundraising priorities with the overarching strategic plan of the institution, or the strategic pillars if your institution is in a campaign as well. Reshunda?
Yeah, and I would also, if I could give some tips and some advice to you, Dr. K, and those who are representing student affairs in their institutions. The hard part, and this is just being honest, sometimes, as Dr. Brown alluded, the priorities for the student affairs, student success, those divisions, it does make it to the bottom of a list when you're thinking about scholarships and you're thinking about facilities, and not that one priority is higher than the other, but there isn't enough resources to go around, and so there is kind of this pecking order. And the other challenge is, most of the times, when you're thinking about a decentralized school where there are assigned fundraisers to each unit, there is this notion that you're fighting for donors and you're fighting for alums. And so while those students who are, as Dr. Brown mentioned, your SGA representatives, your student leaders, they graduate from a school who then become on the radar of that school. So one of the things I would recommend is, if you're not working with your, within the development or the advancement division to track your donors or your students, that will really help bridge that connection when they become alums, that you can tie back to say they were, a part of SGA, they were a student leader on campus. I think we should also be able to have just as much access to them to solicit them as the college or school that they graduated from. And that way you can state your case based on actual engagement and actual affinity. So if schools are not already tracking that, I would certainly recommend that you begin tracking that. The other thing that Dr. Brown and I worked on when we were at Spelman is looking at parents. Parents is an under-tapped area, especially at many of our HBCUs. I've seen other schools that I've worked where they have a fully developed, robust parent and family council, board, association. You think PTAs end after the K through 12 experience, but no, they don't. They can continue in schools. And something that we would tell our parents is they're having the same experience just as their student is having this experience with the institution, and you can make them feel good about their 4, 5, 6, however many years that their student is engaged with the school. And typically that's the area that sometimes as advancement professionals, we overlook. I mean, there will be many times where even at Spelman, we were like, oh my gosh, that person was a parent and that student is like gone. They're graduated. We've never engaged them. We were like, how did we miss that? And we would try to course correct. But I think that's an opportunity where, there isn't a assigned group unless they are alums of the institution. That's a different area. But if they are, parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, bring them into the school community and think of them as an extension, and some who can support the efforts to make their experience for their student better. I don't ever recommend you go to a parent to say, hey, we want you to give to this scholarship, because that does kind of seem awkward. Like, wait, you want me to give to a scholarship, but my student ain't receiving that scholarship. Why? But we can say, we want you as a parent and a family member to support this fund within student affairs, because it will allow all of our students to have this type of experience. It will allow them to have, as Dr. Brown mentioned, some of the priorities, the food bank, the food options, the emergency funds. People can relate to that when you think about the segment of the parent and family. So that's the other thing I would certainly encourage advancement professionals to talk with their colleagues in, their student affairs professionals to talk with their colleagues in advancement about establishing a partnership and also tracking that information.
Awesome. Thank you for that. So we've kind of alluded to this, but want to talk more particularly about the impact of development advancement has had on student affairs, especially in your experiences. What direct impact has those offices had on student affairs, if any?
Well, I would definitely say, number one, the development of a portfolio of donors. To what Dr. Mahone mentioned, parents. They're an untapped market, and expanding on their circles of influence and affluence. So not only can you expand upon their ability to give philanthropically, but they have an extensive network of individuals within their circles of influence, particularly not only leveraging them for philanthropic support, but part of the cultivation strategy is leveraging them for internship opportunities, whether it's domestic or international study abroad opportunities. Also leveraging alumni parents. They can be some of your best fundraisers, because you don't have to really coach them about the experience, because they had the experience and they are enthusiastic about their student being at your current institution, particularly at HBCUs. Leveraging parents during high affinity times, such as homecoming. The HBCU homecoming experience is definitely an opportunity to leverage parents and their ability to connect. In addition to that, one of the other areas of impact that is sometimes untouched that student affairs tend to really touch is leveraging the sorority and fraternity affinity groups. While they do graduate from a school or a college, they oftentimes relate to their experience in student affairs. So really leveraging that. One example that I can speak of that worked really well during the comprehensive campaign at Spelman was the sorority challenge between the AKAs and the Deltas. That actually really took off. It started off as a small idea during reunion that manifested into this huge opportunity, where ultimately those individuals within those sororities not only made an annual fund gift, they made a major gift commitment. In addition to that, some of them looked at a planned gift opportunity. And I will tell you, the people who helped lead that conversation was our student affairs professionals, because they were closer to them. I would also say one of the other big areas that it has some synergies with all HBCUs is the band experience. And leveraging those band alumni. Definitely working with the band director and student activities to really coordinate what that looks like. There's a strong affinity there. We already spoke about student government.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that you said, Dr. Brown, earlier that really struck chord to me was the creation of a freshman seminar course that was focused on leadership, philanthropy, nonprofit. And I know I had mentioned that some years ago, and why don't we have those types of courses for students? Because even though I don't give back to my institution, I believe that, and both of you have said it in so many ways, your institution starts the moment I say I'm going to enroll and then I walk on this campus. So, which ties into the experiences that is provided to me, the relationships that are provided. And so if we did a better way of engaging our freshmen, our first year students about giving and what that looks like, and then adding on to the experience from the student affairs professional to ensure that they're getting the experiences that they need to be happy, sense of belong, all that, etc., you'll have more and more alumni that want to give back just without having to be pulled and coerced and all of that stuff. I think that was a great point. Question for that is, if an institution HBCU is unable to create such a course, what's another alternative for that?
You know, some schools have been creative with Phil on campus, and it's kind of the idea of philanthropy in action. However they call it, if they mirror it to their mascot or anything along those lines, just really kind of showing the physical representation of philanthropy at work, whether it's the building names. I mean, do you talk about how these buildings are named? Who are these individuals? You know, making that connection that if it was a philanthropic gift, or even if it was, you know, what we call an honorific naming, that there is some connection to the building that they've spent a lot of time in, or some function within the library, or just those type of connections, so that students can understand that this was done in large part because of a contribution from an alum or a donor, or a corporation. I think that can certainly plant the seed. And then other ways, as Dr. Brown mentioned, you know, just kind of creating an opportunity to pay it forward. I know one idea that we did at Spelman was the tuition-free day. And this is the day in the academic year where tuition stopped covering the cost to run the institution. And so the students made it a point to recognize that day to say, hey, if tuition alone was all we used to operate the school, and I think for us at Spelman, it was a day in February. So there would be no spring break. There would be, you know, it was like all those things that happen as you're finishing up the academic year. That was something that was a really good connection for the students to know that, yes, tuition alone doesn't cover what it costs to run an institution. And we won't go down that you know, side conversation of rising costs of tuition, but at least it illustrates this moment and how, you know, you want the rest of your academic year to be a complete one. Well, it's because of the extra support that comes from philanthropy and the other resources of the schools. So those would be two ideas that I would recommend. If you can't do a course, just what are those subtle ways that you can really kind of make the connection to a gift and a donor to something that the students are experiencing or that impact them directly.
Gotcha. So, and you all have kind of given nuggets and little things throughout, but what additional strategies can we do as student affairs professionals to collaborate more intentionally with the development and advancement office?
I would say a couple of things. One, working collaboratively with them in their marketing and communications portfolio to show the impact of the student affairs efforts. Particularly, you mentioned, Dr. K, talking about assessment. How are our students progressing from a retention perspective, and the impact of philanthropic gifts on retention? If, for example, if individuals don't give to retention-related scholarships within the colleges, then we can't retain the students, which ultimately impacts our numbers, blase, 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 and so forth and so on. So definitely one of the things that you can do in student affairs is partner with the Central Development Marketing and Communications team to ensure that students are properly positioned in their marketing materials. Many times they just kind of go grab students and they really don't have an understanding as to who should really be in that brochure. And, you know, this is really the experience that we want students to really see and to capture that. And so that it really brings donors in. So definitely, and then creating your own impact report. So one of the great things that you can do is create your own impact report. For example, a lot of institutions during COVID, they created student emergency funds. I would say now's a great time to talk about the impact of those dollars. How did those dollars impact the success of us being able to bring students back in fall 2021? So developing an impact report, that could be something written, that could be a virtual, it could be a video. Dr. K, you all are great at leveraging different platforms and thinking about these big ideas. So how do you leverage gifts that you already have received during COVID and showing that impact, which ultimately sets you up to ask for another gift? So you keep people in the pipeline by impact reporting, and that can be done with a partnership with central development or in isolation, because you will all know who those gifts impacted. I would say the other area that you can collaborate with, and you can start this now, is a day of giving. Many institutions at HBCUs are leveraging the day of giving strategy or Giving Tuesday strategies, and you could create a day of giving for student affairs and really leverage that opportunity in partnership with central development. So there are a number of ways that student affairs professionals can definitely partner with central development and advancement via marketing and communication, as well as a day of giving effort as well.
And I would just underscore those strategies and certainly encourage anyone working in student affairs professionals to just connect with your development colleagues and just kind of learn more about their strategies, how they're fundraising, who they're talking to, you know, what have they heard are the top priorities that they're charged with raising funds for, just to kind of get a lay of the land on what are the things that they're driving towards when it comes to gifts from alums and corporations and foundations, and start to just at least build that relationship so that whenever they hear of opportunities, they know to contact someone in student affairs on working with those solicitations and those proposals. So, you know, the ideas that Dr. Brown mentioned are great. And I would just say that's the first step, is just building those opportunities and really getting to know who the fundraisers are that are out there kind of talking to donors and talking to alums so that they can see how they can help position the priorities for the division.
Right. And those are simple enough strategies that we can truly do those, right? There's nothing that's like, oh my gosh, I have to do X, Y, and Z just before I think about doing that. So as we come to an end and begin to open up for questions from the audience, a call to actions, whether it's for student affairs professionals, HBCUs in general, or your colleagues that work in advancement development at HBCUs.
I would say MYOGF, make your own gift first. You can't ask other people for money if you don't support the institution. Good, bad, or indifferent, I always say MYOGF, make your own gift first, and then you can start that conversation.
All right. I feel like you were talking to me in that moment. Other calls to actions, Dr. Mahone?
You know, I have to definitely echo Dr. Brown. That is always something that, you know, as fundraisers, we believe in. You know, it's hard for us to go out and represent an institution that we ourselves aren't supporting. So I definitely want to stress that is a good one. And if not your own alma mater, at least a place, you know, give to your own division. You know, there is nothing stopping student advancement professionals from supporting and giving, you know, to the division. If it's 5, if it's 10, you know, those dollars really, really do add up. So I just wanted to just underscore that. And I would guess the other call to action would be, you know, think about advancement and fundraising is not just the job of advancement professionals. You know, we talked about it earlier in the session, that is really everyone's job. And so however we can create that culture of responsiveness, the culture of inclusion, the culture of, you know, knowing that these are going to be the future donors of the institution, and however we can draw those connections in subtle ways I think would be key. So, as we mentioned, get to know the advancement professionals, thinking about, what are the funding priorities for the division, have that elevator speech. We tell fundraisers all the time, if you only get, 30 seconds in front of a donor, what are you talking about? And so for student affairs professionals, if you only get 30 seconds with a fundraiser who's representing the schools, what do you want them talking about, and kind of having that dialogue? Those would be the key ways, and like I said, the subtle ways that you can draw that connection for the student to understand that, while tuition is expensive, I heard this saying, this is the most expensive membership you will ever pay is your degree. And so think of it as a membership. These are the members of your institution's family, and you want them to feel good about all of their experience from day one to beyond graduation day, and that lifelong connection is really key.
Yeah, definitely a lifetime membership, especially with loans still out there. Or it kind of remind me of sorority life, right? But one of the things that I'm appreciative of here at A&T is what we do in terms of our capital campaign, and how it is everybody's responsibility. One, and we roll out, we do a whole shindig, right? From luncheons to competitions within departments and across the division, et cetera. And so it is definitely has been eye-opening for me being here at A&T since I've started in 2012, what that looks like and how it's progressed, and even how the branding of the institution ties to that, right? And you mentioned band, and so we are well known for our band, and so they are a part of that celebration and that campaign as well, performing and et cetera. And so it is definitely a big ordeal here for sure. So first, I truly want to thank you for your wisdom that you provided. You've definitely given me some things to think about, not only just in my current position, but in positions that follow, what it looks like to collaborate between student affairs and your development advancement office that I did not think of. And so thank you for that wisdom. And so I want to give honor to our attendees that are here, that if you have any questions or comments, that you can post them in the chat and or the Q&A section within the platform. So I'll give you about 1 or 2 minutes to post those questions. And while we wait for any questions or comments to come in, are there any last thoughts that you all may have for those that are watching and those that will watch again?
Well, Dr. K, I just want to thank you for extending the invitation for Dr. Brown and I to come and share kind of our experiences and just some tips for student affairs professionals. I commend you. I know the work is truly a labor of love. It is one of those assignments where, office hours means absolutely nothing. I would always partner with my colleagues at the VP level with student affairs and just joke and just know that, hey, what can I do for you? Because I know you do so much for the students. What can I do for you? And just having that partnership, because it does not stop. Even when the semester is over, it still doesn't stop. You guys are always supporting and doing all that you can and giving all that you can to the students. So I just want to, on behalf of the students and the people who may not say, no appreciation, because it is certainly, it is sometimes a thankless job. I can imagine the stress level sometimes, but it does make a difference, and it does help our work in the end. So thank you for inviting us, and thank you for what you do for your institutions and for the National Association of Student Affairs Professionals as well. Thank you for the work.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Definitely.
I also would echo the same sentiments as Dr. Mahone. Having served directly in student affairs, it is the best job ever. You all are the nicest people in the entire institutional portfolio. My saying was, student affairs people, they never have a bad day, because you don't. It is the most enthusiastic group of people I have ever served with, and I would do it all over again if afforded the opportunity. I'm telling you, you all have the most fun, and the transformation that happens within student affairs is just priceless. So I definitely say thank you for the work that you do to make our jobs easy, right? Because without you, our jobs wouldn't be easy, because you are the first line of customer service to not only our students, but to our parents as well. You're the first line of people that they talk to and interact with. And it does sometimes feel like a thankless job, but I will tell you, student affairs people have the most fun I've ever seen in my life. I mean, I do it all day, every day, and just thank you for this opportunity. In addition to that, I would also leave you with this last nugget. Development, is a marathon. It's not a sprint. So it's not one of those things where you think you're going to sprint to the finish line. It's a marathon. It does take time. So continue to be patient with your colleagues in development, because sometimes we think we're sprinting and it's really a marathon. We're not moving that fast, but we're moving. So it's definitely a marathon and not a sprint. And happy to continue this conversation, post this session. So feel free to reach out to Dr. Mahone and I individually or as a collective. We'd be more than happy to continue this conversation and do some deep diving into additional strategies.
Awesome. I'm seeing some kudos from attendees in terms of the information that's provided. I don't see any questions. So I think that truly wraps us up, and conversation, especially as it relates to HBCUs and advancement and development. So I'll be reaching out if no one else does in regards to some of those tips that you provided. Want to give notice to those that are watching. Thank you so much for your attendance, whether you attended live or whether you watched the recording later on. Thank you for attending this semester's webinar. And I am so excited about what's to come for fall 2021. You may see some similar faces again, just because the conversation is just so good that we want to continue it. So thank you for the support. Always an advocate for HBCUs. For me, it's important that we teach our own about what we do at our institutions. And so once again, thank you, Dr. Brown. Thank you, Dr. Mahone, for your wisdom and your tips that you provided today. And until fall 2021, I am checking out. So thank you again and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.